Hi, I'm Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work, and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Welcome to this episode. I'm your host, Nikki Lowe, and today I'm going to be talking about becoming a mum without a mum. And this episode launches actually on my mum's birthday. So it's in celebration of her, but it's not just a self-indulgent episode. I'm actually going to be sharing some real nuggets for any mother out there that feels like they'd like more support. And actually, I wrote a blog on this topic about 3.5 years ago now, and it is the most commented blog on my website. Because what I share, I think, speaks to the experience of so many of us as mums, particularly if we've not got our mum around for whatever reason. But it speaks to the challenges of motherhood when you don't feel supported. And to explain what this is all about, I'd like to take you back to November 2005. And on the 27th of November of that year, I was sitting on a beach in the Maldives. And if you can just conjure up in your mind the idea of the most idyllic paradise beach, that's kind of where I was sitting. And as I sat listening to the Indian Ocean lapping up against those pure white sand shores, I had no idea that in the next few minutes, my life was going to change forever. I was halfway through a 2-week holiday of a lifetime with my husband, although he wasn't my husband back then, he was my boyfriend. And I got a phone call from my brother, Elliot, and he rang me and said, "Nick, I don't know how to tell you this, but Mum has died." And as I gripped the phone in my hand, I felt unable to speak, and kind of this cold, numb sensation just ran through my body. Because my mum was my best friend and we had an incredibly close relationship. It was the kind of relationship that people constantly commented on because of its special nature. And she was an incredible woman and mother. So that news was beyond devastating, especially given how sudden and unexpected it was. Now, I realise not everyone is fortunate to have a good relationship with their mum. You know, some people might have their mums physically here, but they may not be emotionally available for them. Some people may be geographically separated from their mums, and some may have made the difficult choice not to have their mums in their life anymore. So many women might find themselves in a situation where they don't have their mum. And the grief of not having your mum around isn't limited to just losing her through death. Over the coming days, months, and even years, I grieved for my mum. I grieved for the heartbreaking loss and for how desperately I missed her. And my grief was so deep at times that I wasn't sure if I'd ever find my way out of it. So fast forward 8 years. And as I prepared to become a mother for the first time, for the birth of my first child, I thought I'd done all the grieving I could possibly have done for her. But I was so wrong, and I so underestimated it. I actually had a friend who had become a mum a few years earlier who'd lost her mum. And I remember her saying to me, it might blindside you, just be prepared. And I remember thinking at the time, okay, that's interesting, but I think I'm okay. I think I've done my grieving. I think, obviously I'm still sad that my mum's no longer around, but I'd really lent into my grief. I mean, I took a year out of my career just to recalibrate after I lost my mum. And that's what sparked me becoming a coach and retraining as an executive coach. So I'd really taken the time to grieve. So I thought I'd gone to the depths of it. But I had no idea of the impact of becoming a mum without having a mother. I became a mum when I was 35, and it was a time in my life when I felt completely ready. I was physically, emotionally, mentally, and financially in the best place I could have been. I felt in a really strong and resourceful place. And whilst I was naturally sad that my mum wasn't here to experience my pregnancy and my impending birth, I felt okay that life doesn't always work out how you want it to. So when I gave birth to my son in 2013, the grief I felt for not having my mum there was overwhelming. I had totally and completely underestimated how much I would miss her and need her. And because of this, I felt completely unprepared and under-resourced to deal with my grief. And at a time when I felt the most vulnerable as a new mum to this precious little bundle, all I wanted to do was call her and hear her reassuring voice, to speak to her and ask her advice, and to really lean into that unconditional love and support. And I felt this deep loss at her not being able to meet her grandchild, and for my son not to have the presence of my mum in his life. Despite being a grown woman and now a mum myself, I also needed to feel mothered. And as Clarissa Pinkola Estes states in her book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, and if you've not read it, it's a really interesting book. Clarissa says that every new mother begins as a child mother. A child mother is old enough to have babies and has good instincts in the right direction, but she needs the mothering of an older woman or women who essentially prompt, encourage and support her in her mothering of her children. The problem was that as a strong, independent and modern woman, I had no idea this was the case before having my first child. And even if I had, I probably would have judged myself for being weak and even perhaps childish. Sadly, I don't think I'm alone in this. Many new mums underestimate the support and nourishment that we might need when we give birth. And by the time that we do, we might not feel able to ask or even receive that help. The situation was compounded for me by the fact that I had none of my maternal family around me or even female relatives. I have brilliant in-laws, so this doesn't detract from the support they gave me and that they continue to give me. But it doesn't and shouldn't replace the support I now know I needed from my mum. And a couple of years after having my son and returning back to work in my practice as an executive coach, I trained in something called systemic coaching. And the training was heavily influenced by family systems. And the work was so profound and fascinating. I ended up doing an 18-month training program in the theory and practice. I used to travel to London every couple of months and go on in-depth training courses. And I even went over to Italy for a week to really do a deep dive in this work. And that training helped me to realise the systemic importance of the relationship with my mum and that everything in life flows from our relationship with our mother. And it's really not surprising, really, given that they brought us into this world and gave us life. And actually that the maternal grandmother in a family is an incredibly important role. And science now shows us that the egg that helped to grow my son was in his grandmother's womb. It's mind-blowing to think that I had his egg in my womb when my mum was pregnant with me. So there's kind of this bizarre and undeniable bond. And when this undeniable bond is somehow broken, and as a new mum, if you don't have your own mum around, the wound is almost inexplicable. It was as if I was experiencing the original grief and loss all over again, but to a whole new level. That this new blessing and bundle of joy in my life was a constant reminder of my mum's absence. So as I approached the birth of my second child, I was very aware of how I might feel without my own mum around again. Obviously, each birth and each baby is different, so I had no idea exactly how I might feel this time, but I was much more mindful that a new level of grief might surface. So I entered the final stages of my pregnancy I actually wanted to feel resourced by my maternal line, which is a systemic term, but it just basically means that you feel that you've got a mother figure to lean into. So I turned to my family systems mentor, a lady called Lynn Stoney, who trained me during my systemic coaching. And Lynn is the most incredible human being. She's one of the most wise women I've ever met. Her presence is just so grounding and calming. And she's got a voice that just is so soothing and healing. And so during a telephone session, Lynn held a space for me to explore my maternal family line and to feel as resourced as I possibly could without actually having my family members physically with me. My mum's family all live away, so they're not physically around me, although I have got aunts who are amazing. And Lynn helped me to acknowledge that giving birth is such an immense act of giving that we need to receive input, and that's often needed from our maternal line to actually do it well. She helped me to bring my own mum into my heart and feel her strength behind me. And she got me to imagine my female ancestors standing behind me in a line, like an unbroken chain. Oh my God, it was so powerful. And I'm not somebody who loves visualization. I know it can be powerful, but for me, it isn't always. But just that action of imagining my female ancestors standing behind me was incredibly resourcing. She also helped me to sit with the reality of my mum not being here and being okay that I will really miss her again. And particularly that I would miss her when my second child came along. She helped me realise that my grief is just love flowing and that the tears that I will undoubtedly continue to shed for the rest of my life are just the liquid love in her honour. And she helped me realise that no one can or should fill the place of my mum, that I should let others in my system, whether that be my family or my friends, have their rightful place, and for me not to try and expect them to be anything else than that, and to be what they are, and that they can't and shouldn't be trying to fill the place of my mum. And that really helped me with the frustration I sometimes felt towards my dad for not stepping up more, or perhaps my husband, and actually realising that's not their role. They're not my mum. And they say it takes a village to raise a child. And I want that village, and I think of the village as the system around me, to be one that nourishes and supports my family. And something I didn't consider with my first child. But when I was preparing for my second, Lynn helped me to consider what she called my sisters of other women. Basically, women that I can have around me to build like my sisterhood. They're kind of females in my life that can help me feel loved, cared for and nourished, just as I would do for them. So when my second child came along, I really consciously connected with my village and asked them for the support that I thought I might need. I gave myself permission to ask for the help. And now I continue to do this now. It was like a great practice for me to build my muscle in asking for the help I need and being able to receive it gracefully. And I think I'm getting better at speaking out about what I need from my virtual village. And when I do that, it makes the grief of my mum not being here just that little bit easier. And that's why I'm so grateful to have the Wisdom for Working Mums community as part of this sisterhood. It's important for each and every one of us, no matter where we are on our mothering journey and no matter what our relationship is like with our own mum, to feel supported and nourished. So I hope those insights have been useful. And I just want to thank you for being part of the community. And I hope by sharing my insights, it helps another mother who might be without her mother for whatever reason to feel some more supported. And I hope it helps you if you know somebody in your life that is going to be having a baby without their own mother around, or has a child without their own mother, some insights into that kind of wound that often isn't spoken about. As always, thank you so much for listening. It's so lovely to have you here listening along with me. Until next time, take care. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too, so if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.